Hi. Get ready. Alright. So, as you heard, I'm going to make a Wisp marble today. It's also a lampwork technique marble. It's going to be made out of glass rods. It will be a medium-sized marble, but it's essentially a series of dots that are stacked between layers of clear glass. So you start off, if you had a glass rod, you've got a gather on the end and you got it flat, then you'd build a dot of color and then a layer of clear, a dot of something, a layer of clear, and work your way out until you had a cylinder. And you collapse that cylinder and then just give it a light twist, evenly you hope, so that it would look like it was a leaf in a breeze. And so today I'm going to put a large layer of silver in the middle and some transparent colors that will be wrapping around. So it'll essentially be a corkscrew of silver that's sort of diaphanous with a few dots of color on either side that'll be stretched out to look like leaves. So the first thing I have to do is get my color sorted, get my glass rods sorted. I'm going to be using large diameter clear rods to get all my gathers. I'm going to be using transparent blue and green. And I'm going to be using some silver leaf in this tin. And I have some special tweezers for it. These are for handling leaf and rouge paper. So I can go into here where all that silver leaf is and pick this out. And there's silver leaf on that rouge paper. I want this big piece. That's right there. And I'm going to put it on my marver plate, which is a graphite flat plate that will let me work the glass in certain ways and draw heat out of it quickly so that I can move to my next step quickly. Sometimes I can use a steel marver plate, which takes heat out more slowly, which is also useful. But for most of my torch working, I'm using a graphite marver plate, graphite paddles, which are essentially mini marver plates that I can hold on a handle. We'll use the head of my torch is flat on the top, and that is steel, and I can use that as a mini marver plate for shaping rods. A lot of times you'll see me, I'll talk about pencil pointing my final handle, and what I'm doing is I'm making a tiny attachment point for the marble. This is just a pointed rod, but I can roll it on the surface of the torch and it doesn't take the heat out very quickly, and so I can take my time and get that shape correct. If I was to do that on a marble plate, I would only get one shot before that glass became cool and I couldn't work on it anymore. So let's get started. I'm going to check my pressures really quick on my torch and my propane tank. And that all looks good. So let's get started with the spark lighter. That loud pop was the oxygen pressure. I let out too fast and it blew out the propane flame. So now I'm going to adjust my flame, and then I might have to adjust my camera a little bit. And my magnifying glass. Let's see, can I still see that? Yep. Alright, that looks good. Alright, I'll put on my eyewear. These are specially made for torch working, and they screen out ultraviolet light, which comes off of the glass during the sodium flare, and the sodium flare itself, which is this yellow flame that you see. Let's see if you can see it in the camera. There it is. So now, if I were to put my camera lens there, my I don't think I'll be able to. It removes that sodium flare. So there, no sodium flare. There's sodium flare. So you can see the difference between what I see. And now for my camera upgrades, all that nightmare of wires and equipment that you saw earlier, I do have little sodium flare glass filters that I built for those cameras. We'll get those going at some point. I was trying that yesterday or the day before, and I was getting a lot of compression as far as the time. So my voice was very high and I was moving very fast. It was kind of disconcerting. So I'm going to see if I can figure out how to improve that for next week. I know I keep saying next week, but I get close and I'm like, I just don't like it for this reason or that reason. And maybe it's because I started doing it this way with just the camera phone. And I like the field of view on the camera. I can include the torch, myself, the magnifying glass. It's quite nice. The main camera that I was trying to use for the Minicam software through the computer was a little bit tighter. I couldn't zoom out. It was not as flexible as a camera, and so I was having problems getting the right positioning within the depth of the fume hood that I work in. It's basically 32 inches deep. It's about 7 feet long, and the inside of it's probably 4 feet high. And then there's a vent above me to my right that vents out the window. And then there's lights and a fan switch that I can control here. I'll be adding actually another fan in the next couple weeks, just because this one doesn't quite move the amount of air that I would like. But I don't like having so much motion that it's wavering my torch flame. Anyway, back to our marble. The marble is going to be mostly clear. I'm starting with a gather from a 14mm rod, a pretty big rod, for more than a ½ inch. When you get that first gather going, a big droplet on the end of the rod, I'm going to flatten it. I'm going to add my first color. It's going to be the outside of one side of the color. The outside color, inside color, middle, inside color, outside color, the end of that cylinder. It'll be a bunch of dots. Big dot, little dot, big dot, little dot. And then twisting. And I don't usually demonstrate this marble because not many people were ever interested in it. I've made marbles since the mid-90s, and mostly for my kaleidoscopes, and I started taking them to these marble shows all around the Midwest. And early on, it was very difficult to generate interest in marbles made by glass workers, because the people who were collecting the old marbles thought we were just going to copy the old marbles and like cheat them or something. And we're like, no, we're making these one at a time. The marbles you collecting were squirted out of a machine, so ours are awesome, yours are stupid, buy ours instead. That did not work out. And for marble collectors, they're interested in a different aesthetic. And so people who make marbles generally, I think, go more towards people who collect glass overall rather than just marble collectors. I suppose I'm in the middle. Alright, so I got a pretty big gather on the end of that rod, and I flattened it. I'm letting it droop backwards. I don't want to do that. Alright, so There it is. Now I want green and blue dots cased over with clear, not cased over, sandwiched. So I'm going to melt this transparent green and get a nice, not a huge melted droplet on the end, but just a little bit. I'm just going to make a tiny dot, about a 1/4 inch across. Then I'm going to flatten it into the surface. Melt it in. And while that's melting in, I'm going to get my other next big clear rod going, flashing it, and bringing the temperature up so that it melts smoothly and doesn't just pop and crackle and shatter into a million pieces. If I just stuck it in, it would shatter. Alright, my large rod has started to melt. I'm going to melt my green transparent glass into the surface and press it down on my marver. You can see the green glass is now pressed into that clear disc. Now I'm going to get a clear gather on top of this, add my next dot of color, another gather of clear, and then I'll be at the half point of building the cylinder, and I can add my silver foil. So I want a nice, I'm using a slightly smaller diameter clear rod than I did for my initial gather. So I'm going to get the melted part of the end of this narrower rod very large and put a big deposit on there. I'm keeping this warm in the farther back portion of the flame because I want to keep it hot enough so that it doesn't crack and close enough to melting so that when I start working it, I don't have to bring it way up to temperature. So let's now add this clear on top of that disc. We'll pull it away and we'll melt it off. Like a little dollop on top of there. Well, it's very hot still. I'm going to press it flat so it's a dot stacked on that first dot. So my first transparent color was green, so my next will be blue, cobalt blue. There, now you can see it. So I'm keeping now this 2-disc gather warm in the back flame. And I'm going to get a small amount of melted cobalt blue. I'm going to put a little dot lined up with the first dot. Melt it off so it separates, and then melt it in. While that's melting in, I'm going to get my large clear rod back in the flame and heat it back up. Getting this clear rod heated up with a nice gather on it is the most time-consuming portion of heating this marble. So there, it's 2 dots of color now. There's a green inside and a blue on the end. The current end. Well, there you can see both lined up. So I have been studying my video making equipment over the past week, and I had probably 3 tries where I sat down, fired everything up, got as much as I could working, turned it off, turned it back on again to make sure I could nail down a procedure to where things worked every time, rather than just getting them working and saying, I'm not sure how I got that working, but I did. I want it to be the same every time so that when I turn it on, I can start everything up, have everything working every time, and go from there, and have all my camera angles worked out in advance. I have 5 cameras, so they would be this view right here, which is great for me just chatting to you and telling you what's coming up and what's coming next. Let's do our next clear gather on top of that blue. I touch it to where I want, I press it on. I bring the whole thing back into the flame and melt the juncture of the rod to separation. Then press this flat, as flat as I can, to match the rest of the cylinder diameter while it's still hot. Now, remember at the beginning, I put aside that silver foil that's right next to me on my marble plate. I'm going to heat up the surface, this end surface. Oh, you can see the two different colors of dot, transparent dot in there. I'm going to pick up that silver. And the silver is very thin, so it's going to be very sensitive to the heat of this flame and the slight breeze of the ventilation that I have going. So I'm going to get this surface pretty hot. I'm going to pick up that foil leaf, and then I have this clear gather just about ready to go. So I'm picking it up, that silver. I'm going to keep it warm, but I can't really get it very close to the flame, and now I'm going to really step on this clear rod and get a huge gather. I'm going to press it onto that silver leaf and cover it up as fast as I can. I'm going to get that gather on, touch it to the silver foil, press it in as far as I can, melt it off immediately, and then press it flat on the marble as quickly as I can to bring the squished little like Hershey's Kiss shape flat and equal to the diameter of the cylinder that I'm creating as quickly as possible. So I've described it. Now I'm going to do it. It's going to be get that glass on there, get it off, melt it free, take this over to the marble plate, squish it, and encase that silver leaf. You can see it. Silver leaf, and it's covered in glass, and I didn't burn it, and I didn't squish through it. It's nice and even. Now, my first color was green. I'm going to do green again because I want green, blue, silver, green, blue. So on the outside of one side there'll be transparent green, on the outside of the other side will be transparent blue. And you can do this any way you want, and it doesn't matter. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. Even if I messed this up and switched the order around, it would still look cool, and I would love it. I'm just doing it this way because very often when you're moving through a project, having a plan is great because then you know what to deviate from. Like, that plan was good, but screw that plan! I'm doing it my own way now. And the good thing is that the plan was your way and the deviation from the plan also your way, so it's a win-win, lose-lose, whatever. We're having a good time. Alright, so that transparent green's on there, but it's bumped out a little bit, so I'm going to get it flatter, and I'm going to get my next clear gather here. And what's going to happen is I'm going to flatten that transparent green, and I'm getting a clear gather. It's going to go over top of there, and then I'm going to get my last transparent blue one. And then our cylinder is going to be almost complete. What I'll just have to do is even out the amount of clear I have on both ends of the cylinder. Then I can melt off the attaching clear glass rods and switch to metal punties, because then I'm going to do some stuff. I'm going to change the axis. Once I have it marble shaped, I'm going to change the axis off at about 80 degrees and then impart my twist. Alright, so I'm trying to do both things at once. I'm doing neither very well. I'm going to switch to just melting that transparent green blob into the surface for now. Get that done. And there. That's not melted in, and it's now melted in. It's smooth. See all the layers of dots. Now I'm going to get my gather from this clear rod really big. I'm just keeping this part warm, the existing cylinder. Alright, and not quite as quickly as the silver, but as quickly as the other dots, I'm going to apply my clear gather, pull away, melt to separate, and I have that little Hershey's Kiss looking thing, and I'm going to smush it flat. And there's my next disc on the cylinder. I'm going to add my last dot of color now, which is going to be a dot of cobalt blue. And at some point, the cylinder will start to melt all together, and you'll be able to see all those flattened dots just hanging there, suspended within the clear layers. I'm going to try to get this stuff in there quickly. I let that green one get cold, and it was hard to get flat again. I want to let them get flat without pushing them to make them spread out. So they're thin and small, but they're not taking up a lot of surface area on the disc. So you can see that dot is about the same as all of the other dots that we put on there. Consistency will add to the coolness of the design. There's also some fun things you can do where you make your first dot, you make it small, and then you go bigger, 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 bigger as you go through. And then depending on the way you start to twist it, you can have that big dot wrapping around all the smaller dots, or flip it and have that small dot be trying to wrap around those bigger dots. It's a philosophically interesting concept. Anyway, this is a kind of a subtle design based on a simple technique, and I think it looks fantastic from every direction. And one thing that I'm going to add to this that I just remembered is I'm going to add one more layer after I encase this blue dot, not encase, but sandwich this blue dot. Something I like to add to a lot of my marbles. You're not allowed to add this to your marbles because I did it first, so yeah. No, you can do whatever you want. I'm just kidding. But I like to add a little UV active glass, and this is something that I mix up myself. There's a lot of ways to do UV glass now. It used to only be uranium Vaseline glass, but now there's like ceramic glow powders. You can recycle old Vaseline glass and pull it into your rods of whatever brand you're using. The compatibility is too far apart to do that, but others, they're close enough and you can do that. And then there are some tricks to stretching your compatibility between glasses. It's kind of a chemistry thing, but it's not too hard. I tell my more serious students about it if they're taking notes. You guys don't care. We're just going to make a marble. It'll be great. Alright, so, hey, look at that. All our stacked dots. I put a little dot of UV glass in there. You can see it. It's just a little opaque, like an egg white. Now I'm going to add another dollop or two of this clear glass rod. And what is cool is that I have used, this rod was about 1.5 feet long when I started. It'll be about half that length when I'm done. So that's how much glass I've used. There is a very interesting way, if you ever wanted to make these huge, to do it on the furnace. It helps to have a helper, but you can do it yourself. It's actually, even though it's a little bit complicated and control-oriented, getting a gather, stretching it out, adding it to your initial gather, you can do it on your own. I usually have like a block of wood that I can set my piece in and walk away for the 30 seconds it takes me to get a pipe in, get a small gather, and bring it to my existing piece, put it on there, attach the new gather to the end of what I'm working on, bring it to the torch, separate it, and then put my whatever pipe I'm gathering out of the furnace with back in the preheat. I was talking and I forgot to flatten that last disc. So I'm going to flatten that because I want to put. I talked earlier about evening the amount of clear glass on both ends of this cylinder, and so I want to add one more to this end. One more little squish. And then we'll start melting that cylinder. Look how cool that looks. Just the way it is. A bunch of clear dots all squished together with different transparent dots and silver leaf in between them. Alright, so the last one I don't have to squish flat because that's the end of my cylinder. So I'm going to turn up my heat just a little bit more propane. It's burning cleanly, and now I'm heating up rather than just keeping this one in the back flame. I'm bringing it in, I'm spinning it faster because I don't want to settle on any particular exterior point and start to burn the glass. So spin it fast, hot as you can, and then I'm going to start compressing the cylinder into a sphere. I'm going to show it to you in 30 more seconds. I think a lot of those discs are going to start to pull. You can already see it started. You can start seeing all those discs in there. The color discs and the foil disc. As the clear discs start merging into one another. And they were merged before. It's just where they meet and it was humped. It's bending the light so you can't see what's inside. Now, as they melt together and surface tension pulls the outer surface smooth and gets rid of all those valleys in between the discs, we'll be able to see what's inside. The secret is revealed. If you see any little flashes, you're not going crazy. In Wisconsin, we have a very large bloom of gnats. And gnats, like moths, love, look at the discs, you can see them now. Isn't that cool? And then in the middle of that dark blue and lighter one is that layer of silver. Anyway, so gnats are dive bombing, and they only have to get like within a half inch of this flame and they go, whoosh. So, and there's a bunch of them. And that might be so fast that the camera is not always registering them. Now I'm going to start making that cylinder compressed and spherical on the end that's not attached to my initial large clear rod. I don't even have to do a lot. I mainly just press it into a hemisphere. I'm going to say that's good enough for now. I'm going to heat up a stainless steel rod. This is my handle. Glassworkers call these punties. Sometimes I will say punty out of habit. But for you guys, I'm trying to say handle, because that's what it is. I can't touch this glass. Can't touch anything I'm working on in the flame here. All has to be at least 3 inches away. I mean, even this, me holding it, is pretty hot on my hand. This is about as short as I would go for such a large rod. When rods get this short, I attach them to another smaller piece of rod, which is then a handle for my handle. Hilarious. Alright, so I've melted that large glass rod free. Oh, it looks like an acorn. That happens sometimes. Oh, look, and you can see all of the discs in there. That's cool. So, melt it, get it fairly spherical. I'm not concerned about the surface, just the shape, because I want to control the heat all the way through evenly. I can't do that when it's funky shaped. When it's spherical shaped, I can do that. So I'm going to get it spherical. I'm heating the unattached side right now. And once it's spherical, I'm going to attach punties to where I want the new axis of rotation to be. And there won't be a lot of rotation, just some. So first pass through the molds. Not very spherical. Let's get it hot again. When it's spherical and you can see all of the discs, you get a really good idea of what we've built. Now I do have some areas where the silver leaf has come out. I don't know if you can see it when it's not in the flame. There, right there, you see that? There's along the edge of that blue disc, there's a little fuzzy area. And that needs to get cleaned up. And I have 3 areas like that. It has to be pretty hot to see for that difference in the surface of the glass and the few atoms of silver that are interacting with the surface of the glass to resolve. Now it looks like I got most of that, so we can go back to sphericalizing this. Now when I go back to sphericalizing without just pressing into the mold, I start with a hemisphere that's larger than the marble I'm working on. Then I go to one that's smaller, and I change the axis of rotation as I rotate. I can get it pretty spherical, and now you can see all the layers we put in there. Now, I'm not concerned about the surface, so I'm going to pick one of the poles, and I want to be, and this is where you can have fun with it. I could go choose like one of the planes that intersects my colors on the inside. I could do it on the colors of the outside. I could go anywhere. For this one, I'm going to go just outside of the plane on either side, off by less than 5 degrees. Right now I have a dirty spot where that stainless steel was plunged into the glass. So I'm going to pull that stuff out. And I'm going to examine my surface under extreme heat to make sure there aren't any other impurities from the silver poking through, any other bubbles I can get, any other gnat I pulled some of the surface out of sphere, so I got the impurities out there. Let's see if they're gone. But I am going to just run it quick through the molds quickly. Now you have another view of the layers, and there's the silver in the layers. There's the layer towards you, has the UV glass on top. You can just barely see it. It's very insect wing-like. Just There's 2 dots on that side. Now, I need to pour some heat back into this. I'm going to get the whole thing evenly heated and evenly ready to start moving when I'm twisting it. So I'm adding heat to the whole marble, heating this stainless steel punty up, and I'm going to need to have a lot of leverage on this. So I'm going to the opposite of where I put that first one in. Wherever you choose, it's going to look fine. So now I have both of my punties attached. You see, I'm off from that central plane of the silver by about 5 degrees. You can do it anywhere. I love to experiment. I haven't made a lot of this technique in this straightforward fashion in a while. I use this technique compounded with other techniques now. And so it's nice to go back to the basics and see if you're still aligned, for the basics before you start adding it to other things again. And going back to the basics a lot of times gives you ideas for new things you want to try. Starting to turn. So, when imparting twist to a lampwork marble like this, I'm keeping it spinning. I'm spinning with both hands. But depending on where I want to impart twist, and how the heat is, I'm sort of catching with one hand or the other, but I'm twisting with the other. Opposite hand, and I'm gradually imparting more twist to that marble. And I don't want, if the ends get too hot, they're just going to twist around and around. And some designs might look good that way, but I want it to twist from one end of the marble to the other evenly. And I want it to go around maybe a little more than once. And at the center, from edge to edge, the equator, the circumference around that gold foil goes around once. Those little wisps, those dots, will go around less. But it makes for a nice marble to look at, makes for a nice marble to look through, and for this one, it will also be a nice marble for your blacklight situations. Hotel cleaning, raves, what have you. And I'm pretty satisfied with this twist. Now, you can see this from the end, middle. I'm hitting the wall with the other hand, so I can't show you quite in the magnifying glass, but maybe you can. Look at that. Look. All right. So now we're going to finish this marble. So I picked one of the handles to start loosening. Heat the stainless steel until it twists out. Add the water. Heat the whole marble. I want to examine that attachment point. And if you heat the stainless steel rod more than the glass and you pull it out, stainless steel will pull some glass with it and not leave anything behind. And that's okay in this instance because it was going right into some clear. It's coming right out again. I'm just taking a little clear with it. since this marble is mostly clear and it wasn't touching a design edge, then it won't have interfered with my design at all. So now, let's get it hot enough. I'm going to run it through and sphericalize the portion that's unattached to a handle right now. I start in the hemisphere that's larger, then I go to one that's smaller, and I rotate it and change the axis of rotation. And if I can spin it, and you can hear that it continues to spin, that means it's pretty spherical. Now I'm going to heat the surface to get it smooth, get all the ripples out. I'm going to run it through my cherry wood paddles. They are cherry wood boards that I've shaped into a paddle shape, drilled holes in, and then I pre-burned the edge of the hole so that, like when I am shaping a marble and I go to a smaller hemisphere after I've been in the larger hemisphere, and I'm just using the rim of that hemisphere while changing the axis of rotation, that's when I'm really making the marble spherical. And so the cherry wood molds are essentially rim molds as well. I'm just using the rims of those drilled holes. They've all been burned in. I prepare them by making a practice marble and just burning the crap out of the paddles. Heat the marble, go through the molds. Heat the marble, go through the molds. You don't always have to do that. A lot of times if you want to rotate in a new marble paddle, you can have a new one and just use it very lightly. Ooh, look at that. It's the first time I've been able to do that on camera. Pretty cool. Alright. That side is looking very nice. It's smooth. It's round. It's vertical. That's right. I'm still seeing a little bit of waver in the glass. So rather than send it through the cherry wood paddles again, I'm just going to flame polish it. And then give it a little bit for the outside to firm up before I attach my final glass coating. I had a little crack in the end of the rod, and so I applied heat and tapped it off because I want to have an attachment point that's free of fractures so that it doesn't come off when I don't want it to. So I melted off that last one, and I think I have just a tiny impurity in there. I'm going to heat that up and see as I'm heating up this other half of the marble to give it its final shape. So it doesn't look like anything was in there. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but glass is very clean on the end. See that silver foil? It's like a frozen tornado. So I'm going to be pretty quick about this since one side of my marble is already as spherical as I want to get it. I'm just going to tap it in the bigger one for a second and then go to the smaller. Sphere, just using the rim mold, and you can see it continues to spin, and so I can finish spinning it. And oh, look, there's where I tapped the torch last week. Finishing my marble and switching to beads, which which I was doing on the fly. I hadn't planned carefully enough. Just touch the torch for a second. Alright, so it's spherical. But there's a few ripples. I'm getting those out. I'm going to let it rest just for about 10 seconds, and then I'm going to go into the cherry wood molds. See if I can get back in the I know. Why doesn't he hold it steady so I can see it? I'm looking what I'm at doing. I'm looking at the proximity of the magnifying glass. I'm looking at the screen to make sure I'm in the screen. It's good practice. Keeping track of a bunch of different things like that. Alright, so I saw some ripples in there, so I went back for them. And that's looking pretty magical. I'm going to hit it in one pass on the cherry wood molds, and then I'm going to go to my knockoff fiber board. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to cool the junction between the rod and the marble with these mini jacks, actually scissors. I'll tap it off, come back at my torch, and polish that end. I'm in a fireproof board, compressed fiber frax board. I just tapped it off. I'm grabbing my torch. I'm heating the whole half of the marble. And then I'm focusing on that little nub. Then I'm going to point away, let it settle down, go back, do the whole process again, let it rest, and then the third time I'm getting that spot super orange so I can see every little bit of impurity and stuff in there. I'm going to grab marble pliers that I've made, wire that for holding the marble. I'm going to heat it up until it gets just orange, like that. We'll let it cool down to black, and I can pick up my marble. There it is. Now it goes to the annealing oven. Alright, thanks for watching everyone live, and this will be on Facebook Live for a couple of weeks, and then it'll get switched over to my Patreon site. So go shopping, Pavliscak Studios.com, and have a great week. I'll see you next time. Bye.